alternative to Beijing. Be it his India First approach through free trade agreements, Make in India, or attracting greater FDI, economic diplomacy is now a core component of Modi's foreign policy, catapulting India to the status of the world's fourth largest economy. Interestingly, New Delhi has now built robust ties with the West, a sustained partnership with Russia, this amid the complex Ukraine conflict, supporting Israel's fight against terror, while also calling for an independent Palestine. It's this global engagement that's insulated India from the surrounding turbulence. All displaying a new India that's offering solutions to global challenges. In 2023, India's G20 presidency positioned the country as a voice for the global South, with admission of the African Union to the G20, a move that solidified India's G20 theme of Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam, meaning one earth, one family, one future. Interestingly, Modi's Neighbourhood First and the Act East policy have deepened engagement with Southeast Asian nations, also to counterbalance China's clout. In fact, after the Galwan Valley crisis of 2020, India's firm resolve against Chinese military aggression has now led to a thaw in ties. So much so, the power play of Modi, Xi and Putin at the recently concluded SCO in Tianjin has redefined Modi 3.0, even as Trump's tariffs have plunged the world into uncertainty, particularly India that's slapped with the highest US tariff of 50%, despite New Delhi being a key strategic ally to Washington. But the India-US bilateral relationship has spanned over 2 decades. Much can be credited to the Quad grouping comprising India, US, Japan and Australia. Its focus: ensure a free and open Indo-Pacific while also countering Chinese aggression. But the watershed moment for Modi's foreign policy arrived with Operation Sindoor. This, as Modi declared, that this is not an era of war, but it is not an era of terrorism either.
हमने आतंकवादियों को मिट्टी में मिलाने के लिए भारत की सेनाओं को पूरी छूट दे दी और आज हर आतंकी, आतंक का हर संगठन जान चुका है कि हमारी बहनों बेटियों के माथे से सिंदूर हटाने का अंजाम क्या होता है.
Whether the most recent political upheaval in Nepal or last year in Bangladesh, from Sri Lanka to Myanmar, Afghanistan to Pakistan, India under Modi has remained a beacon of democracy in a region engulfed in turmoil and lawlessness.
All right, let's go across to former National Security Advisor to the U.S. government. Ambassador John Bolton is now joining us. Ambassador, thank you very much for speaking with us here on CNN News 18. There seems to be a bit of a thaw, or at least that's the phrase here in the Indian media that's being used in the India-US relationship after the last month or so of these tariff threats and so on, and you know, all the comments that were coming out of White House officials. Just over the last few days, President Trump has called the India relationship a special one. He's called Prime Minister Modi a friend of his. The new ambassador designate, Sergio Gore, in his Senate confirmation hearing, again had nice things to say about India and the relationship. Do you see this as a softening of the position by the Trump White House and by President Trump in particular? And if it is, what do you attribute it to? Why has this softening happened?
Well, it's better than the opposite, I guess I'd say that. And, you know, it's good for a couple days in Trump world. I do think that he and Prime Minister Modi have a good personal relationship. They certainly did until the recent issues arose. So for Trump, that's the basis of everything else, that he sees state-to-state relations as being the equivalent of personal relations. And I think he does have a lot of respect for Prime Minister Modi. Now, whether that is enough to carry us beyond not only the tariffs that Trump has imposed, but his calls over the weekend after the incursion into Polish airspace by Russian drones, where Trump said he wasn't going to impose any further sanctions on Russia until Europe cut off all its own purchases of Russian oil and gas and imposed 50 to 100% tariffs on India and China for their purchases of Russian gas. So many people are questioning exactly what that last call to Europe to do really means. But I think it shows the reality of how Trump works, and that is in a very confused way.
So there are trade conversations that are happening this week between India and the US. The view here in India seems to be, if you were to divide up the tariffs into two parts, one was the reciprocal tariffs that were announced in early August, and then the second set of tariffs, which were the secondary tariffs on purchasing Russian oil that came into effect at the end of August. And India feels that it's the secondary tariffs which are the problem, because no other country has been slapped with this, and 50% tariffs make Indian goods unviable in the US market. So if Trump were to walk back on the second set of tariffs, India can live with the first set of tariffs. What are the chances that Trump might walk back on the second one, and what will it take for him to walk back on it?
Well, I don't think it's impossible because he doesn't move in straight lines and often doubles back. You may have heard the Wall Street slogan with some of his threats on tariffs: Trump always chickens out. In this case, he did put the extra 25% tariffs in effect, but he could pull them back. I think it's possible. I don't know when, but I do think it's possible. My understanding was as well, there was concern in India that on the, I'll call them the underlying economic tariffs, that Indian negotiators thought they and their American counterparts were making progress when all of a sudden Trump called off a round of negotiations, I think it was back in August, and put 25% tariffs on. That happened to other countries too. That's not consolation, I understand, but that's the way Trump tends to do things. So if those negotiations resumed, that I think would also be a positive sign, because it may be the two sides were actually not that far apart in reaching an agreement. Maybe neither side liked it, but it could be the tariffs would end up being lower than that first tranche of 25%.
I also want to ask you if you think this recent softening has anything to do with the pictures of bonhomie that we saw between Modi and Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin in Tianjin at the SCO summit. And do you really think that these three countries can come together and sort of realign the global order or the global playbook, as it were? Is that why Trump has seemingly softened in the last few days?
Well, I think the pictures may have had an effect. I think that's what Prime Minister Modi intended. I think that's the way it was read in the United States. I think, though, over the long term, it's extraordinarily unlikely that India and China will join up together against anybody. And the real question is, as Russia and China form an ever closer axis, obviously with China as the predominant partner, not like the Sino-Soviet alliance of the Cold War, where it was the Soviet Union that was the senior partner. I think that inevitably poses a decision for India whether to reduce the level of dependence and ties it's had with Russia, and at least in my view, move more toward working with things like the Asian Security Quad, Japan, Australia, India, and the United States.
I just want to talk a little bit about that, because India is supposed to be hosting the Quad later this year. We still don't have confirmation whether Trump will fly down to India for that. And the general sense is, in the Trump administration in the second term, there has been a de-emphasis of putting India as some kind of a strategic counterweight to China. Trump's not that interested in the Quad anymore. He just wants to cut a deal with Xi Jinping. So where does that leave countries like Japan, Australia, and India?
Well, I think many countries are confused and a little worried about Trump's inability to focus on big strategic issues. He loves to focus on discrete deals. He loves to talk about tariffs because they involve dollars and cents, which he feels comfortable with. But it is the big strategic picture that's important. And I think certainly in terms of members of Congress and others who speak out on these issues, speak with the president, they're telling him that this is critically important, really, for the United States and its friends and partners in the Indo-Pacific for the rest of this century.
You talked about, the Polish airspace issue some time back, and how that's, again, linked up back to India's purchase of Russian oil. I want to talk about, what's happening between Russia and Ukraine, certainly since the Alaska summit in the last 1 month. There seems to be, at least from the Russian side, more aggressive attacks, whether it's on Kiev, whether it is, testing NATO's resolve with these incursions into Poland and so on. It's almost like, the summit happened in Alaska and Putin is now doubling down on his attacks on Ukraine. What do you make of that?
Well, my sense is that Putin thinks he has a free hand post the Anchorage summit. And I think the behavior on the battlefield and other things that you've just cited are evidence of that. I don't think this incursion of the drones into Polish airspace, for example, was an accident at all. They were supposed to be headed toward Ukraine. That's to the south of Belarus and Russia, not Poland, which is to the west. I think it was an effort to test NATO resolve and also to see how well NATO was equipped to deal with drone incursions. And while most of them were shot down, they were shot down by very expensive air-to-air missiles, $250,000 shooting down a $10,000 drone. That is not sustainable. So it demonstrates that what's happening on the battlefield in Ukraine in terms of drone technology, drone tactics, show Ukraine and Russia far ahead of the rest of the world. And for the U.S. and its friends, dealing with this new emerging form of aerial warfare, the drones and swarms of drones, small, inexpensive, but very deadly, is a matter that requires urgent attention.
I also want to talk a little bit about Israel's strike on Doha, which happened last week, and there was an emergency summit of Arab leaders over the weekend. There was a meeting between President Trump and Prime Minister of Qatar. President Trump has sort of washed his hands off and said he has nothing to do with the strike on Qatar. It was entirely Netanyahu's call. What do you think is going on there? Again, Netanyahu doesn't seem to be in any hurry to end the war, either with Hamas in Gaza. He's doubling down on a new sort of mission inside Gaza City. And then you have these strikes on Qatar. It seems like he's just expanding his sort of ambit of wars in the region.
Well, I think really you have to look at the conflicts in various theaters as part of one larger war launched by Iran through Hamas on October the 7th, 2023. This is what the Iranians call their Ring of Fire strategy around Israel, which has proven to be a monumental failure for the Iranians. There's interesting news that just broke a short time ago in Washington that from the Israeli side, they say they told Trump an hour before the strike in Qatar, which would have been enough time for Trump to tell Netanyahu not to do it. So we've got a discrepancy in the stories. Look, it can't be in U.S. interest to have one of its allies striking another of its allies. We have a major air base in Qatar. At the same time, I think people can understand that the idea that the terrorist leadership of Hamas somehow has a privileged sanctuary isn't acceptable either. That can't be the answer, that if they're in a nice hotel in a nice city somewhere, that they're immune from retaliation for the evil that they did and planned on October 7 and before. But obviously, it's this particular outcome has caused problems for the United States. That's why Secretary of State Marco Rubio has just been in Israel. He's, I think, right now in Qatar, and I think that's important because the U.S. needs a united front with Israel and the Arab states against the threat posed by Iran.
And one final word, I think the biggest story in America has been the killing of Charlie Kirk, the right-wing activist, podcaster. It sort of seems to have opened a raw wound in the social fabric of America. All the divisions, the polarization is really coming to the fore. And Trump and his advisors and his White House officials have been really using this as an opportunity to go after the left and the radicals, and they're calling them murderers. And they're sort of setting everyone up for what looks like a crackdown. Do you think there is even the remotest possibility of some kind of degree of unity to get through this rather tough and fragile period for the United States, or Trump is using this to double down on his political attack on his political opponents as he sees it?
Well, the killing was a tragedy of enormous proportions and really unacceptable in a free and open society, because there's no excuse for that kind of action, no matter what anybody says. And what we really need is for people to calm down and look in the mirror. That's not what Trump's doing. A traditional president, if I can put it that way, would be saying at this point, I'm president of all the people, and it's in all of our interest to turn the temperature down. And as you point out, that's not what he's doing. I am worried there would be consequences, but I count on the good sense of most people to say we don't accept that violence is going to become normal in America. We're going to do at least individual by individual what we can do to prevent that.
All right, Ambassador John Bolton, we'll leave it at that. Thank you very much for joining us here on CNN News 8.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
presented by. This is News 18 Network. India's largest news network.
From Bengaluru, this is Bengaluru-based logistics tech company BlackBuck, which will move out of its Bengaluru office on Bengaluru's outer ring road after 9 long years and has blamed worsening traffic and crumbling infrastructure for the decision. Co-founder and CEO Rajesh Yabji says that employees' one-way commute now averages more than 1.5 hours. There are reactions that have come in on the story. Mohandas Pai, Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw have slammed the Congress government for its failure and for forcing this kind of a tech giant to move out of its office. 9 long years, remember, the office was in this very location. BlackBuck now planning to move out its office plus what they call home from Bengaluru's Bengaluru area on the outer ring road due to bad roads and traffic. Going across to Harish Upadhyay, who joins us with more details. Tell us a little bit about this tech firm's decision. What's of course being spoken of is how you have the likes of Mohandas Pai, Kiran Mazumdar now raising this, slamming the Congress government, raising the larger question of civic apathy in Bengaluru. But tell us a little bit about this decision, really, Harish.
Crispin, this is the logistics tech platform, which is BlackBuck, and the co-founder has tweeted this, saying that it's taking a toll, the commute is taking a toll on him and his colleagues because it's taking easily 1.5 hours one way to travel to the office, and this is because of the bad roads, the potholes, and dust. And he believes that he doesn't see things changing even at least in the next 5 years or so. It's important to highlight here is that the area that we're talking about, the outer ring road, this is a belt that has several IT companies, several Fortune 500 companies, and it's been a long grouse that the road condition here is not fine. Not just that, there is a metro construction that's happening here that hasn't really moved at the pace that these companies would ideally want and has overshot deadlines. And that's a big grouse that most of these companies are having, that there are bottlenecks on this road, and the commute in some cases, just getting out of the tech park itself takes at least 30-40 minutes for several of these people who work here. We've seen the Bengaluru police having a long consultation with the outer ring road companies as well. Many of them asked to change timings to ensure that the traffic flow can be regulated. But looks like some of these companies are losing patience. And the government has been assuring, in fact, earlier in the week as well, we've seen the Deputy Chief Minister saying that in the next few weeks, works worth around 1,100 crore rupees just for road improvement will begin in Bengaluru. But many of these companies saying that it's not just potholes, the fact that the government doesn't believe that it's important to clean roads and ensure they're dust-free itself shows the kind of importance that they give to the sector, especially the sectors operating on some of these roads.
And this has created a huge conversation, or led to a huge conversation around the state of affairs in Bengaluru, across Bengaluru, Harish, isn't it? Many users, in fact, using this just as an example to highlight the stormwater drains, sewage, electricity, lack of proper roads. They've been calling this total neglect. How is the Congress reacting to this, and what are the steps in place, if at all, that have been taken over the last few years?
Well, remember, the problem is something that's persisted over the last several years. And the area that we are talking about, just on this outer ring road itself, 2 years back, we saw flooding near a particular tech park, after which the government tried to address it with additional pipelines and stormwater drains. The government saying that we've ensured that the overall stormwater drain network is revived and we also develop. And this government saying that we've given additional funding for some of these works. But let's also not forget that most of these tech entrepreneurs and including industry leaders believe that the leaders who are getting elected from Bengaluru are not doing enough, whether it's from the BJP in the previous regime or the current Congress regime in Karnataka. They're not doing enough for the city. The corruption that's there, the fact that there are roads that are being developed and then they go on to have potholes within a year or two is a serious concern on why the tech capital of the country can't ensure basic good quality roads in the city.
This is actually called the IT corridor of Bengaluru, isn't it, Harish? And in that sense, houses several offices. Tell us a little bit about the current state of affairs, compelling, a tech giant to entirely move out of this location. Are there others who are, weighing in on the same? What is the situation as we speak of this entire patch?
Well, one definite shift that we've seen over the last year or so is many of these companies looking to expand are moving to North Bengaluru. They're not setting up their second or third offices on the outer ring road. Despite the government undertaking a metro work, which is perhaps has finished half of its construction or civic work, most of these companies are now preferring North Bengaluru that has connectivity to the airport and is still not crowded like how the outer ring road or the electronic city area is. So we are looking at several of these companies moving to North Bengaluru. We'll have to see if BlackBuck also decides to move there or move out of Bengaluru completely. That's something we'll have to see in the coming few weeks. But let's also not forget that there are already concerns saying that even the development in North Bengaluru is not happening in a very planned manner. And we might end up having another Mahadevpura or a Bengaluru on north side of Bengaluru.
Okay, Harish, stay on with us. We're being joined by BJP's Ashok Gowda. Let's take in a view from him on what he makes of this decision that's come in from BlackBuck, a tech giant in Bengaluru. Mr. Gowda, good morning to you. Tell us what you make of this. While currently this is being cited as an example in taking on the Congress on what more needs to be done, this is really not a Congress or a BJP problem alone. We've seen Bengaluru face these issues for years now with little change taking place on ground. Mr. Ashok Gowda, can you hear me? Okay, not sure if he's through. We'll reconnect that line with him. Harish continues to stay on with us. Harish.
Viewers, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has turned 75 today. Over the last 25 years, he's emerged as India's most influential and arguably its most credible political brand. For years altogether, these plaudits were showered upon India's first Prime Minister, Jawaharlal Nehru. But it will be difficult to deny that Modi's time in office, especially as Prime Minister, has been just as consequential in shaping India, that is Bharat. In any event, the